Hello everyone, it's Joe from Scarecrow Joe's Studio. Welcome back to part 3 of our coffin house tutorial. We're in parts 1 and 2. We constructed our coffin house, put in the little windows, and in this part 3, we're going to start the fun stuff, which is laying on the clay and sculpting. So let's get down to it. Okay, for this portion of the tutorial, you're going to need only 4 things. You're going to need, first and foremost, your coffin house structure, and you're going to need some paper mache clay. The clay that I'm using today is our homemade paper mache studio clay that we use probably 90% of the time when we make our art and our different props and things like that. The other thing that you're going to need is some kind of sculpting tools. These are the 2 tools that I use most for creating pretty much everything. They're just some basic sculpting tools. They come in a set of 3. Here's the other one that comes in the set. I rarely use that one, but it does come in handy. So these are like, I don't know, I think maybe $4. I got them at Michael's craft store. So you can go ahead and pick up some basic sculpting tools. If you don't have any sculpting tools, you could go ahead and use like a butter knife or something like that. That'll work as well. Okay? The other 2 things that you're going to need is time and patience. Time and patience is for actually creating it, and the drying time in between after we start applying the clay. Now, we do have a tutorial on how to make our studio clay here, so check that out. It's on our YouTube channel as well. But if you're not too keen on making your own clay, you could go ahead and buy some pre-made paper mache clays. There's a lot of them out there. And I'll go ahead as usual with my recommendations on some of the clays and roll them across the screen for you right now so that you know what those are. All right, let's get down to it. So I'm going to go ahead and start by sculpting the actual coffin portion of this structure first. I have a lot of clumps and strings of the dried hot glue on here, so I'm just going to pull some of that off of there. Get some of that off of there so that's out of your way. You're going to cover all of this over with the clay, so some of it on there is not going to be that big of a deal. But this is just what I want to do. Alright, we're ready to start sculpting, I think. So I'm going to go ahead and start on the bottom here, and I'm just going to press in some clay. All the way around here. So that's what you're going to do. You're just going to go ahead and lay on your clay, press it onto your structure, your armature. I'm going around the door right now at this point. I'm not going to sculpt the door in right now. I just want to go around the door. Try to lay it on as evenly as you possibly can so that you don't have areas that are thicker than others. Just kind of get it on there as evenly as you possibly can. Another string of glue that's bugging me, so I'm going to get that out of there. The other thing that I want to do real quick is to mark out, because we have these toothpicks here over the windows where our bars are on the windows. And I want to just go ahead and mark out where my window, that pen's not good enough for it. I'm just going to go ahead and mark out right around where my window is. The edge of my window where I laid in or glued in so like about right there where I glued in these wax windows. So I'm just kind of marking that area. That's going to give me a guideline to where I want to lay my clay in over. Just like that. I'm going to do the same thing with my door window here. So that's going to give me a guideline to where I want to lay my clay in. Okay, so when you get to this part here, where you've got some clay on the front of your coffin house here, go in and make sure that your clay is even. So if you have some areas that have less clay than others, add some more clay to those areas. So by doing this, you're adding definition to where, like you're adding definition that's going to make it more three-dimensional. So where your windows are. All right, so you can see when I turn it here, you can see where it gives it that three-dimensional look and more definition to where the windows look that laid in inside the structure instead of just sitting on top of it. And the door as well, you can see that. So once you have this part done, go ahead and take your sculpting tools and just start smoothing it out. So you're going to totally smooth it out. And once it's smoothed out and dry, we will be adding the door frame, the stone door frame. We'll be adding some frame around the windows. Okay, so now that you have your paper mache clay laid on to the front of your coffin structure, we're going to go ahead and give the windows a little more definition here by just pressing in the clay. This is where these little sculpting tools here, this one has a curved end to it, so that's when it comes in really handy for things like this. Once you have taken your sculpting tools or your butter knife or whatever it is you're using, and you smoothed out the window areas there, as you can see, and also your door area, trying to give you a better view here. But at this point we can go ahead and flip this thing around. You're going to do the same thing. Take your paper mache clay and lay it evenly. You're going to take your paper mache clay and lay it evenly along the back of your coffin house. All right, I've got my clay laid on to the back panel of my coffin, and I'm going to do the same thing as the front. I'm going to go ahead and just start smoothing out the clay. So that's what you'll do at this point. Okay, so we've done the top, smooth that over. We've got the front, the back, and all the sides. So the first thing that we're going to do at this point in the tutorial is we need to start making it look like it's an actual wooden coffin. So keep in mind that on these edges around here, we're going to put in a border. You can see that in the picture. There's a border around that. That's where we're going to create. But the first thing we're going to do is put in the little intricate details that's going to make it look like a coffin. And the way that we're going to do that is we're going to go horizontal across here with your sculpting tool or your butter knife, whatever it is that you're using, and you're going to just lay in your lines here for your wood planks. So I'm going to do horizontal all the way across. And we'll do the bottom section of it. Right across here, we're going to put in a border. Okay, one thing that I do want to mention is that you do want to make sure that you have these in here. Make a good indentation in here. So that way when we go in after this is dry and we're completely finished with the entire sculpt on the entire project, it's going to show up a lot better through the paint. So I've done both sides. Okay. And I did those horizontal. And then I also went ahead and I did the top. Just like that. So it makes it look like it's wooden planks. What I'm going to do on the front here, I want to go vertical. And I'll start over here with the sides. So we've put in our markings for our wood, or to make it look like wood. Make sure you guys put those markings in there deep enough. Okay, all the way down. And I did the back panel the same way. I did those vertical. I did the sides horizontal and the top horizontal. Now we're going to go in and we're going to put in just a few more fine details on this. And you could use a toothpick for this, or if you have any kind of other sculpting tool, you can use that. I have one of these things. And basically we're going to go ahead and just put in some markings just like that, here and there. And if you want to get real creative, to make this look more like wood, some parts of wood have like those knots or the eyes. You could go ahead and carve a few of those in there. Make some indentations in your coffin house like that if you wanted. But basically that's all I'm doing. I'm just putting a few more lines in here using a tool, but you can also use a toothpick, works just as good. Okay, now these don't have to be as deep as where your wooden planks are, or as deep as those are. Just kind of scrape a few in because it's going to give it more texture and make it look more like wood. So go ahead and do that. Put in some, you can even put in, you know, a few holes here and there like that, you know, wherever you want. Let's do another one over here. A few indentations, you know, as for some knots, that kind of thing. All right. Now when this dries and we apply the paint, we're going to use a dry brush technique, and it's really going to bring out this texture. You're really going to be able to see these little intricate details. You're really going to be able to see these little intricate details more once we have it painted. We're going to go ahead and do the same with the back side. I'm just going to go scrape in a few marks here and there. Just to give it the look of wood. And I know it doesn't really look like that right now, but once we're done with it, it will. Put a few little knots or eyes for the wood in there, randomly, wherever you want it. Just like that. You can do the same thing. Put in a few marks here and there. Go ahead and do the other side. It's going to give it more of like a wood grain type of a look to it. And it's going to look even more cool when after this dries and we go ahead and create a border along all of our edges here. And we're even going to put a border right around here. All right. Put a few on the top. All right, I think that looks pretty good. Just make sure again that you're putting in some deep lines in here. That's going to give it a definition of like some wood planks, and then some not so deep little lines for some definition. Cool. So that's going to be it for this coffin part. We are not going to build up our staircase. We're not going to lay in our door or sculpt in our door yet. We're going to wait for the structure to dry completely. But while you're waiting for that to dry completely, what you can do is on the base of your structure here, go ahead and apply clay. Lay down the clay just like you did on your coffin house. Okay, so you went ahead and you've pressed in your clay on your base here. You can go ahead and smooth that out if you want, although it is completely unnecessary because we're going to cover this area with some moss and maybe some mulch. We're going to put a little tree here. So smoothing this out really is unnecessary. And even if you don't want to add those other little details like the moss and whatnot, it's going to give you a completely different texture of a ground kind of a cover than your smoothed over wooden coffin house. The couple of things that I do want to point out, make sure that in here along the base of your coffin house, get some good clay in there, press it in there, because this is going to hold this house down onto the base very, very strong once this clay hardens. So that's just not just the hot glue holding it on. You're actually going to have this really strong paper mache clay holding it on. So go around with your finger, press that in all the way around your coffin. And then here, once we get to the point, which will be in the next segment, we're going to build up our stone staircase here. So press that down in there to leave you some room to work around. Press it on down in here. Press that down. On the other side. Get all that clay pressed down in there. All right, now once that is done, we have to let this thing dry before we can manipulate it and handle it. And we're going to put in the staircase, the door. We'll put in our border here and our window sills basically in there. That'll be on the next segment. So let this thing dry. It's going to dry faster if you're living in a warm environment right now. Stick it outside in the sun. It'll dry very quickly. Or stick it in front of a fan. Just let it sit in front of a blowing fan, and that's going to help it to dry a lot faster as well. Alright guys, well that's it for part 3 of our tutorial. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. If you have subscribed, thank you. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one. Take care.